So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, broadcast and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Back in the early days following Al Gore's invention of the Internet, there were a few hardy souls delivering content via something called Netscape. One of those people, back in 1994, was me, Mr. Media. I started doing this as a syndicated weekly newspaper feature and website back when newspaper editors didn't know URLs from their, well, never mind. One of the first compadres I encountered was a guy named Aaron Barnhart, who was writing something called Late Show News, which followed David Letterman, Jay Leno, and a few other guys whose names are, well, better left unsaid at the moment. After 5 years, Aaron, the TV critic for the Kansas City Star, broadened his scope to all TV and changed the name of his web operation to TV Barn. He's been at it ever since and is considered a dean among his counterparts. Eric Deggans hasn't been a TV critic quite as long, but he joined the St. Petersburg Times in 1995 and has spent 11 years of that time covering TV and media. He's also covered music and served on the paper's editorial board. Eric made his rep nationally over the years by campaigning for greater representation of minorities in network television. You may also have seen him as a guest on Sunday morning talk shows, including CNN's Reliable Sources. And he, like Aaron, runs a popular TV and media blog. His is called The Feed. I've asked these guys, both of whom I consider old friends, to join us tonight to talk about the upcoming TV season, the future of technology on TV, and to answer your questions. Call in now at 646-595-3135 and get those questions ready. Aaron and Eric, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks very much.
How are you guys?
Doing great. It's a funny time of year because usually at this point of the year we're up to our ears in TV pilots, and we're sorting through them all, trying to figure out which of the 25 or 30 or 35 new shows we like the best. We don't have that problem this year because there aren't those stacks of pilots sitting on our desk. Through probably I would say more than one factor. This fall season is turning out to be. It's going to have plenty of new television shows. It's not like viewers are going to be complaining that there's nothing but reruns on. It's just that the number of new shows that we typically associate with fall, just like the new auto lines, those are going to be largely missing this fall.
I have to say I'm just so totally jazzed because like 2 hours ago I filed my last story for the newspaper's fall TV preview. Thank you very much. So it's running on Sunday for anybody who can get a hold of the St. Petersburg Times or see it online. And I agree with Aaron. It's been a very weird season because we don't have many pilots of the new shows, and some of the most anticipated new shows won't air until October, and you won't even see, as a viewer, a fully engaged fall TV season until after Halloween. I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah, and it's not. I know we're going to be talking about technology here, but this is just a plain old, 20th, if not 19th century issue, which is labor and management couldn't get together, and last November the writers of these TV shows went on strike, and I really don't know what the network executives thought that they could make do without them. They played poker with the wrong bunch because these guys were absolutely determined to get a deal that was fair to them and which reflected, back germane to the topic, new technologies for which they had not been fairly compensated ever since they started doing deals for home video and VCRs. Back in the 1980s, they really had never gotten fair compensation, and they said, this is absolutely our last stand. We are going to start getting percentages on our efforts to these shows that are then resold, not just now for DVDs and home videos, but online for video streaming and God knows what else, and we're not getting anything from that. And we demand to be paid, and management said, basically they said, make us pay you. So they did. 14 weeks later, the writer's strike was over. But as a result, the whole pilot season, and this is sort of the season that happens away from the cameras. This is the development of TV shows, 90% of which will never actually make it on air because the network will decide it's not an idea that's ready for prime time. But this whole development season that typically takes place in those months when the strike was going on, months like the January and February and March, that was all put on hold, as well as the rest of the television season, by the strike. And so as a result, this process got kick-started very slowly, and it just seems to have been very slow in coming back. And as a result, basically there's one network on television, CBS, that showed up with a full slate of fall pilots. Everybody else has been just sort of a ragtag train of, last year's last year's shows. We're going to relaunch them this fall. You're seeing a lot of that. Fox brought one or two new pilots. ABC, I don't know, Eric, does ABC actually have a pilot that they can call a fall show?
That's a good question. They have two new shows that are supposed to debut this fall. One of them, Life on Mars, David E. Kelley, the guy who created Ally McBeal, was supposed to be the mastermind behind creating an American version of this British show about a cop who travels back in time after he gets hit by a car. He got pushed off that show. They moved it to New York City, and they added Harvey Keitel and Michael Imperioli to the cast. So, I mean, it looks like it's going to be very interesting, but we have no idea what the show's going to be like. We haven't seen a pilot, and they haven't provided us with any footage beyond a trailer that literally has like 11 seconds of images in it. And then there's Opportunity Knocks. They have a game show, and they're still filming that right up to the wire.
That's right.
In fact, they're pilot of that either.
In fact, they're doing a press tour to launch the show in cities around the country, including Kansas City. And my guess is they're going, if not to Tampa, St. Pete, going to
probably Orlando
for sure. Yeah. And again, this is a show that they showed their advertisers in May. Kind of a mock-up of the show. They did a test show, but apparently the show has also been completely reworked since then. So it just, and then we haven't even gotten to NBC, which basically is showing up with nothing. And now there are reports over the weekend that it's party hardy president of entertainment, Ben Silverman, may be out of a job, and it's not just his freewheeling ways that are going to get him in trouble. It's the fact that he used the writer's strike as an excuse for the fact that he had nothing developed for the fall season. So we heard this talk all year long that the writer's strike was going to signal a new age in network television, that we were going to see year-round development of TV shows, and that there wasn't just going to be, the traditional fall launch. We're going to have it year-round. But I think we're already seeing in the NBC executive shakeup that seems to be looming as an indicator of that in fact viewers look forward to the fall, and they expect to see new shows in the fall, and the networks are now in trouble because. And I think are headed for some real ratings challenges this fall because they didn't show up with a lot of new product.
Guys, didn't the networks and the production companies also use the strike as an excuse to cancel an awful lot of production deals that they couldn't otherwise get out of?
Yeah, but those were presumably with people who they had kind of given them deals and maybe they didn't deserve them in the first place.
Right.
One of the things that's interesting about this, like I was talking a little bit about to Mark Cherry, the guy who created Desperate Housewives, and he was talking about why we're seeing so much reality TV, for example. And he worked on the Golden Girls, and he talked about how when sitcoms were so popular, everybody who was even remotely connected to a successful sitcom got a production deal of their own. So people who were sort of third and fourth string writers on Friends and Seinfeld and these other shows got their own production deals and couldn't create shows because they weren't particularly talented or they hadn't spent enough time sort of earning their wings in the networks. So you got this flood of really mediocre product that wound up killing the sitcom. And young people now are disinterested in sitcoms, I think, in part because they're so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch Friends, or you watch Everybody Loves Raymond, or you watch Frasier, and then watch How I Met Your Mother, or Big Bang Theory, or The New Adventures of Old Christine, any of these newer sitcoms, you immediately see how awful sitcoms are right now compared to even shows that were popular 3 or 4 years ago. So that's part of what I think is going on here. The industry is kind of rejiggering itself and shaking off some people who have big production deals and probably don't deserve them. But the other thing that's happening here is the playing field is getting real even in terms of viewers. Viewers could care less whether a show is on the network or on cable or on premium cable or on the web or on DVDs. They just want good product.
Yeah. Now the internet has not quite accrued the viewership yet to compete with television, but it is interesting.
Not yet.
It is interesting how cable television really has leveled the playing field. Shows like The Closer and, of course, Hannah Montana, and now this new show that has really come out and surprised everybody, The Secret Life of the American Teenager. I don't know why it surprised everybody. It's from Brenda Hampton, the woman who created Seventh Heaven, which basically kept the WB network propped up the last 3 years of its existence. And these shows, just because they're on cable and available to only 85 to 90% of the country, as opposed to a network like NBC that's everywhere, these have really aggregated those viewers. Now, the development online that I think is really fascinating is how these 5 to 7 minute forms are, and the low barrier to entry in terms of cost, and the fact that everybody is sort of jumping in the pool all at once. You have newspapers like the New York Times that are creating very high-quality videos. You have magazines. You have television networks like Comedy Central that is, and Adult Swim and Current TV, which are all developing incredibly rich and diverse lines of video that are only available through their .com. And then you've got people who've never been players before, like Rocket Boom, that have basically created a reputation just out of practically nothing. One personality, one good idea, and then next thing you know, 2 million people are watching them on YouTube or their own website. And that's the interesting thing, because at some point it's going to be possible for the average person to sit down, call up pick up their remote, point it at their set-top box of choice, and surf the internet for video and watch these programs. There will be some sophisticated indexing. They'll be able to find the things that other people are watching. My guess is people will join groups and watch things that other people like them are recommending, and that's really where you will start to see the time suck pull away from traditional TV.
It's certainly happening now where, we don't really care what. I know, you mentioned Closer and between the shows that we watch on whether it be TNT or USA or Showtime. Showtime's come on very strong.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It doesn't really matter to us where the shows are, as long as we know that there's some good stuff to watch. Do you guys think that we're heading for, sooner rather than later, a single device that will give us all of our TV and our internet? Right now, it still seems like,
Without a doubt. I've always said that I think that the cable box is that device. It will be that device. And right now, if you're here in St. Petersburg and you have Bright House Networks cable, I don't mean this to be a commercial for them, but that's my cable provider. So if you got Bright House cable and you have their DVR already, you have a TiVo-like digital video recorder. You have video on demand of not only movies but select cable shows and select HD shows. And you also have all the music packages that they have, and all the regular cable programming. All they really have to add is online functionality, a way to surf the web and watch that video, in quality on your TV set, and I guarantee you that day is coming.
Well, and let me give you a good example of this. My TiVo, which is on Time Warner Cable, Bright House Networks is sort of like Time Warner's smarter brother, because they basically were spun off from Time Warner onto the Orlando market, and they've done some things there that haven't been done, and I think Advanced Newhouse owns part of it too. But the thing about my TiVo boxes, I can actually now call up select internet content where TiVo has done a deal. And I don't know if money is changing hands or if this is just TiVo people saying, we like your content, we'd like to feature it to give people an idea of stuff that they can get if they hook us up to their home network. Because I think TiVo wants to be that box. I'm not sure that they've got the wherewithal to do it, but they'd like to be that. And so I can go through a menu now and search for some of the most popular web video, including from the New York Times. I order up the Minimalist so I can see easy recipes being made that are the video counterpart to stories that run in the New York Times. The Onion News Network, very popular satirical news network, does great videos, very entertaining stuff, edgier than The Daily Show. And I get those every time they update. It's basically I'm subscribing to an RSS feed to each of these groups, which then use the TiVo network to deliver their content, in the off hours over the broadband connection that I have to my home office router. So that's one very practical way in which it's happening with a proprietary owner of cable boxes like TiVo. I think that it's no coincidence that you can actually go into a store and buy a TiVo box, and that it is one of the most advanced appliances for delivering video and the closest to achieving the model that you described, Bob. But I think that, and one of the things that's interesting in my market is that somebody is actually filing a class action suit against Time Warner Cable because he wants to be able to own a cable box. And as you know, the cable company forces you essentially to rent their equipment. And I don't know if this lawsuit will get anywhere, but I think it underscores the frustration people feel that they're renting these boxes in perpetuity, and what are they really getting for it? They're really getting more of the exact same service that they were getting 5-10 years ago. And I think that the future is going to be in owned boxes, because then I think there's, for whatever reason, going to be the incentive to offer more with that box, like the TiVo owner already enjoys, and there are other examples of that out there.
The only thing I would disagree on that with is I think the cable providers realize that their business is dependent on controlling those channels and controlling how you receive those channels and controlling what you pay to receive those channels. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be hard for any provider outside of TiVo to come in with a new box and try to have the same kind of functionality that a Bright House Networks will have with a DVR that can access, all the different functions that they have. And when I did the math, for example, with my DVR, and if you rent a TiVo, if you buy a TiVo and you get the lifetime service, which basically gives you TiVo service for as long as that machine you have lasts. Mm-hmm. The machine lasts about 2 years, 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. You'll end up paying that same amount of money if you rent a DVR from Bright House Networks for the same amount of time. It's really the same amount of money. So people may feel like they're renting something, but the fact of the matter, they're spending the same amount of money. It's just, do you want to own it or do you want to rent it from Bright House and decide, a month from now that you're not interested in it anymore and return it and not have to deal with the money. So, I do think that cable providers are uniquely positioned to give you a device that does everything. I mean, right now, like I said, here in my market, only thing you can't do is surf the web. And I get my DSL service from Bright House. It's just not part of that cable box yet. It will be.
The problem, I think, Eric, with the box, because you and I are on the same system, the box from Bright House, and I suspect from other cable providers, is in the, I don't know, year and a half to 2 years that we've had like an HD box from Bright House, the capacity is only 20 hours. And, you know, I believe the TiVo boxes have, Aaron, you can probably tell me, a much greater capacity to hold.
Yeah, so you can. The one that I went out and bought is 300 hours. I mean, it's just now if you do all high definition, that goes down considerably. But in theory, you can store hundreds of hours of video at a time on this mother. And, you know, let's face it, now you can walk into Costco and buy 500 gigabytes or a terabyte of data data storage for your computer for, 50 cents a gigabyte. This is not terribly expensive anymore. And so but what's happened is, of course, is that these cable companies, because they're in the rental business, have invested so heavily in these things. Now, the salvation here would be if you had a portable device, let's say a cable card that you could take and stick into any appliance and immediately tune into whatever your local cable or satellite provider of your choice is, and immediately get all the services available to them. Well, that was the idea when the FCC, in fact, introduced a concept called the cable card. And it has been mired in technical issues really ever since its introduction. In fact, as people who are listening to this, who read my website, TV Barn, know, there's been a bit of a soap opera going on between this small but hardy band of cable card owners and the cable company. There are about 1,200 of us in a cable system serving about 275,000 households, and we were informed that effective September 1st, many of the channels that are on our cable system were being moved to a place on the cable system where we could not get to them. And long story short, it's because the cable card is a one-directional device. It receives content from the cable company. I cannot click my device, my remote, and relay a signal back up to the cable company through my cable card. And what that means is I don't get any video on demand, I don't get any pay-per-view, and now, as it turns out, I also don't get Sundance Channel or BBC America or about 24 other channels, because in a space-saving move that's probably too technical to get into here, I can't ask for those channels either. That actually involves sending a request back to the plant. Please give me, I want my BBC America. And it won't give it to me, no matter how hard I try. This was supposed to be the device that liberated people from having to rent a box. They could actually go out and buy a box or a TV set and then rent these little cable cards. And that was supposed to be the solution. And again, it's proven how difficult it is to impose a single kind of standard like that on an entire industry.
Well, let's change gears a little bit. We really need to talk about some actual shows, I think. Hands down, guys, what is the worst new show that each of you have seen from this?
Let me guess what Aaron's going to say.
Okay.
Let me guess what Aaron's going to say. Do Not Disturb?
Yeah, I borrowed a line from our friend Maureen Ryan, who's a TV critic at the Chicago Tribune, who said that it made her soul vomit.
I love that.
This is just a dreadful Jerry O'Connell's Nia Nisi or what Nisi? What's her name? Niecy Nash sitcom set in a hotel. And first of all, sitcom plus hotel. Okay, first of all, there have been way too many shows with that concept, and secondly, it's exactly what Eric said a while ago about sitcoms. It's all that and a bag of chips. The sitcom is dead. You have to reinvent it, and fortunately, a lot of very funny people out there are starting to reinvent the sitcom, but apparently nobody at Fox Entertainment got the memo, because they've been desperately trying to develop another hit sitcom. They've got this Brad Garrett stinker called Till Death. Although
aptly named.
Although I did catch it the other night, and they obviously they've been they're not totally insensible to change, and it's a little better than it was, but then they were pairing it with this Patty Heaton Kelsey Grammer disaster. And now they're trying it with Do Not Disturb. I would say there should be a cable division too, because cable is in fact putting a lot of new shows on in the fall. They used to steer clear of prime time of the networks. They used to get out of their way. They would be on in the summer, and then they'd clear out, and the networks would bring their shows on. That's not the case anymore, and you see a lot of shows like tomorrow night. We'll see the Sons of Anarchy on FX.
Great show.
Yeah,
Great show.
I'm kind of getting into it, and then HBO's got the True Blood show coming on Sunday.
Not so great show.
No, so anyway, so it's cable's got its own slate of shows, and in that division, I would have to nominate this show that debuted last night on TNT called Raising the Bar, which did anything but raise the bar in terms of quality TV entertainment. It's from Steve Bochco, who, of course, really practically invented the modern episodic network drama with Hill Street Blues and L.A. Law and NYPD Blue. I mean, here's a guy with some real credentials. He did a pretty ambitious Iraq War drama 3 years ago called Over There, and then he did this, and it's just, I mean, first of all, there are three people named Bochco in the credits, and so I suspect that this is somewhat of the Stephen Bochco family full employment plan going into effect here.
His shows have always been like that. When he did Philly, his wife and his son both worked on it. So.
And we know how long that one lasted. But I would just say that that has to be mentioned because TNT spent a lot of money putting the show on the air. They got Jane Kasmerick to play a loony judge, but she's totally wrong for the part. She way oversells it. There's a storyline. Well, I guess now the show's aired, I can mention that she's banging her clerk, and that who in turn is coming on to guys. So he's bisexual. None of that works. I went stone cold watching those sequences. I said, "Is this supposed to get me interested in this show?"
And they gave us 3 episodes. It was just like it was like nails on the chalkboard of my soul to evoke Maureen Ryan again. I think there is a great story somewhere about how some of the titans of TV producing have fallen so low, because we look at what happened to David E. Kelly getting kicked off of
that was
Mars.
A shocker.
And now we have Stephen Bochco putting together just this heap of a show that is bad only because it's rooted in really old television.
Yep.
The problem is that when in the first 5 minutes of this show, we know every character, we know exactly what they're about, and we know what they're going to do. And that is the kiss of death for modern television.
Yeah, I mean,
you have to surprise audiences. You cannot give them a scenario that they feel like they've seen before. And the other problem here is that it doesn't feel realistic, because we've seen too many verite dramas where we know that defense attorneys' clients are often guilty. So give us a series where these public defenders are constantly defending people who are innocent, and your brain just kind of seizes up, and you go, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So it's wrong at some
point. Well, Eric, they say that there was that story that Fraser Moore, the critic for the AP, did about a week ago. He didn't name any names, but he said that a lot of TV actors he interviews admit that they don't watch TV. Right. I could actually think of a couple off the top of my head who I was saying in a room when they said I don't watch TV. Christine Baranski was one. There are a couple others. Carol Burnett doesn't watch any television. I found that kind of shocking and surprising. But
David
I think
Duchovny told me that.
Yep.
He's
too busy.
Terry Hatcher told me that.
He's too busy fornicating to actually.
He's too busy. He's too busy on his computer, from what I hear. But
anyway, but it's clear now that some of these TV producers also don't keep up with the latest trends, and I think that's why the television is ultimately a business that has to serve youth. And as much as we complain about shows like Gossip Girl and some of these other shows on television that practically pander to the teenage and up demographic, and this, you hear these complaints from actresses that over the age of, all the Desperate Housewives, are very lucky women because they're going to continue to be, stars well into their 40s. In fact, Mark Cherry, the creator of the show, is fast-forwarding them 5 years, half a decade, prematurely aging them, to I guess to make a point. But they're the lucky ones. But in fact, that is the way of all things in popular entertainment. Youth must be served because I'm
going to have to disagree with you again, my friend.
That is where the new ideas come from. Now, a lot of them are bad ideas.
Disagree with you again, my friend, because you think about the great TV shows that we can think of in the last few years. If you think about The Sopranos, if you think about The Closer, if you think about Mad Men, you think about these great shows, they do not star young actors. They are not focused on young people. And the reason that critics like them and the reason that their fans like them is because they are very specifically not about things that people feel like they've been through already. I think what people want is they want substance and they want quality, and they want a sense that either a contemporary story is being told or the story is being told in a contemporary manner. That's what people want.
Yeah, I won't argue too much with that, except to point out that the average age of a person in the cast these days tends to be younger, and you're leaving out the whole component of reality television, which we really haven't touched on much here, but does make up most of the top 20 of Nielsen's primetime most watched programs, and those are overwhelmingly directed toward the youth audience.
Yeah, well, quality versus quantity of viewership, I think, is where we're parting company. But I do think that when you think about shows that are raising the bar in terms of television, that are breaking new ground and feel very new and different, then they're not focused on young people. But what they do is they try to be adventurous about how they tell stories, and they don't rest on cliches. And that's the problem with a lot of these shows. The problem with most sitcoms is that the minute the show starts, you know where the jokes are. You know what the point of the show is. You know who's the wacky character. You know who's the straight-laced character. You know how these characters are going to bump up against each other, and there's no surprises. And I think one thing that modern TV consumers demand is to be surprised, which is why reality TV is so successful, because there is this illusion of surprise. There is a sense that anything can happen because it's real people and it's supposedly not scripted. We all know that can be a crock often, but that's the promise of the form. And also with a show like Damages or a show like Mad Men or a show like The Sopranos, what's engaging about those shows is that they are unpredictable, and they tell stories in new ways that we have not seen 10,000 times before.
Yeah, I would suggest we're probably not that too far apart on these things.
No, yeah, I think we're saying the same thing different ways. We are twin sons of different mothers,
Guys, let me ask you this. This is a favorite. I want to say a favorite subject of Eric's, but the reality is I know he'd rather not have to talk about it, and that is minority representation on network shows. Eric, I think I saw you wrote recently that there are no new leads on new shows. Is that right?
I refuse to count a cartoon black guy who is played by a white guy. I refuse to count the guy who
the Clarence Gilliam character.
I refuse to count the people in the Cleveland show, which is an animated show that.
Right.
Season. But so there are no. Well, what's interesting to me about this season, which it's really tickling me now, is like we complained about this 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And what they did was after all the shows were picked up, then they started slotting black characters as like best friends and stuff, right? And so, we slagged that off, right? We talked about how awful that was. So now what they do is they're slotting in black stars. So Lawrence Fishburne is joining CSI, and Angela Bassett is joining ER.
Plus, her real-life husband will make an appearance.
Her real-life husband's going on the show, and the woman that's on My Own Worst Enemy, the Kristen Slater show. Mm-hmm. She's the Emmy winner. She was on Desperate Housewives. I'm blanking on her name.
Oh, Alfre Woodard.
Alfre Woodard is on My Own Worst Enemy, and all this casting happens after the show is announced and after the scripts are written. It's sort of again, it's an afterthought. But what they're doing now,
it makes you wonder what took so long.
Well, what they're doing now is almost what I call the Esipatha Murkison effect, which is they realize that having
that's exactly right.
Esipatha plays the lieutenant on Law and Order, and she's been on the show now. I think she's the longest running character, and she's attained a kind of a stature on that show that's important. And it's compelling. They've done a lot of good things with that character, and she's wonderful. So what they figured out is that if they can add a black actor who has some stature, then it doesn't look like they just stuck somebody in there to add diversity.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And in fact, they can't just you can't just stick an Angela Bassett on ER and not have her do something. You can't stick Lawrence Fishburne on CSI and not have him do something. So these characters will be substantive, but it's still an afterthought. It's still something that kind of happens after the fact.
But you're actually bringing up a point that I hadn't thought about until just now, but the bench of African-American actors, thanks to cinema and to some degree the stage, is deeper than it has been probably since the 1960s. And so as a result of that and television's hunger for ever more high-profile stars to make their shows, we've talked about this in the past about the influx of higher profile people, who used to never do television. In this generation they do television, and they don't just do movies of the week anymore either, if those existed today. They do serial television. Gary Sinise, of course, was sort of my tip-off that the game was changing when he was hired at CSI New York at a point when he still had some money power going for him.
But again, what happens is when Gary Sinise decides to do a show, or when Glenn Close decides to do a show, or when Kyra Sedgwick decides to do a show, or when Holly Hunter decides to do a show, the show is built around their character from day one.
Good point.
Lawrence Fishburne and Alfre Woodard and Angela Bassett did not get those opportunities, and I don't really understand it, because if you think about them, some of the most bankable actors in movies right now are people of color, and so I don't. Why isn't TV trying to build the next Will Smith?
Yeah,
I really don't understand.
Well, I think that Andre Braugher had the opportunity to be that person, but it's like you can't just consider it. And the suggestion that you're making, Eric, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is okay. They tried that, and now it's back to casting the Clarence Gilliards, just in slightly more elevated.
Well, but do you say, well, we tried to build a career for name-failed white actor here, and that didn't work, so we stop.
No, I know, and the reason, by the way, that HBO, of course, plays by a different rule book and does in fact bring those people in. And by the way, as I mentioned HBO, I want to mention the fact that Lance Reddick is a character who was obviously slated, plugged into this show by J.J. Abrams called Fringe on the Fox network, and that does look like one of the better fall shows, or shows that I've seen any sign of from they're going to air anytime between now and next May. This Fringe show actually looks pretty good. But Lance Reddick plays easily the most wooden character on the show, and you would never know that he was one of these great character actors who made up the ensemble for 5 years on The Wire. And so there's also, I would have to say, the networkizer effect that affects all actors, but seems to be particularly hard on a certain kind of character actor in that they're only allowed a certain number of motions or ranges of emotion and so forth.
Well,
and produces a David Caruso, who's a worldwide superstar, basically for whipping off his sunglasses.
Putting the button on those scenes.
Let me ask you this, because I asked you that question to ask you this question.
Interview strategy. Very good.
What if the United States elects an African-American president in November? Does that send the networks, and for that matter the cable shows, back to the drawing board for next spring? Because they need to have
Dennis Haysbert is history. That's the thing, is that the networks will pat themselves on the back and say, we
were ahead of the curve. That's what they'll say. Yeah. No. What will change it is if a person of color comes along and just makes a ton of money for somebody as a star of a show.
Yeah.
We saw
really almost a Dennis Franz kind of, and wins the Emmys and makes the money. I mean, I think both the dollars and the prestige would have to be there for that to happen.
Yeah, Chris Rock on the HBO's The Blacklist, the recent documentary where they basically had 22 different black people talking to the camera about their experiences. Chris Rock said that his dad had this theory that black folks can't win on a decision against white folks. You have to knock the other guy out, And I really think that in this case that comparison is kind of apt. You can't just have somebody like Lance Reddick come along, who's a great character actor and does great work for a long time. You can't have somebody like a Patha Murkison who just comes along and does a great job in a character role for 13 years. You have to knock the industry out. And we have not had that yet on television since Cosby, really. Yeah. And that's what we need. We need somebody to come along and just kind of rule the TV world the way American Idol rules reality TV.
And to do that, to work our way backwards, Eric, we also need to have the laboratory, and we don't have that. The reason that Andre Braugher emerged was because he was one of several minority characters on Homicide: Life on the Street, a police drama that was low rated, but always tried to be authentic to the story that it was trying to tell, and was honored by critics and its small but devoted legion of viewers for doing so. But because they did that, they were able to build up a bench, and out of that came Andre Braugher. And The Wire, if people had, if more than you and me and about 1 million other people had watched The Wire, you could see that happening too. In fact, at least two people have emerged from The Wire to achieve some stardom.
Two white actors.
The kid on 90210.
Oh yeah, the kid on 90210. Yeah.
And Lance Reddick, of course.
But I will say this. Roots aired and was the most watched miniseries at the time. Was this cultural phenomenon, and one black actor got another job off of that miniseries, LeVar Burton. I think, unfortunately, the way the industry works is a little different. Lou Gossett Jr. has talked about winning the Oscar and not working for a year and a half after that. So I'm not so sure that it would even happen if something like that were to come to pass. But what gives me hope, and I'll just say this briefly, the BET has a great new show called Somebody's, a scripted drama that's going to start, or a scripted comedy that's going to start next week. And BET has had so much nonsense on its air for so many years, and this is a show that is actually funny and was totally written, totally directed, and stars one guy from Atlanta who wrote this series about his friends. And he could have done it on the net, but he wound up doing it on BET. And that gives me hope. We do have some laboratories where people are creating some interesting things. We just have to get them to a wider audience.
Eric, I was going to say, would you rather have Louis Gossett Jr. doing one movie a year and a half after winning the Academy Award? Would you rather have Cuba Gooding doing every movie possible. All right, enough of that. Let me ask you a different question. Don't even answer. Listen, two of the most popular shows that came out of last season, at least popular in my house, were Pushing Daisies from ABC and Chuck on NBC. And our household, and I can only speak for our household, completely puzzled why both networks, separate networks, did not choose to repeat those shows over the summer leading into the new season. And I wondered if either of you had any insight on that.
Yeah, well, one of the things is that the networks are now very rerun averse, and that's a development that is directly related to the rise of cable television, and the increase of viewer choice, not only through channel multiplication, but through the ability to store TV shows and watch them later. So many viewers are learning how to live rerun-free existences, and they're doing this through a combination of schedule, which increasingly will pull a rerun and instead put a short-run reality show or something like that in, or schedule a series so that it airs consecutively without reruns. Not only network programs like 24 and Lost, which will be starting next season, practically at the end of the season, so they can air their 17 episodes in a row, but shows on cable television. The NBC networks like USA with Monk and Psych and Sci-Fi with Galactica are famous for doing this. They'll even split seasons into like 2 half seasons just so they can promote this raft of new episodes, put them on, and then take them off. Not even reruns are made available. So through both of those factors, networks are learning that the viewer doesn't really like to watch a rerun. And this trend has been going on for at least 10 years now. I think it was probably about 10 years I first started noticing that NBC would put reruns of ER on in the summer, and they just die. I mean, people would just stop watching them because they'd already seen that episode, and they had better things to do than watch it again. And that really is a difference between the TV that we watched growing up and TV today. It's amazing, but there were only 4 networks, and they had the same episode orders that they do now. It's 22 episodes for a season. So that meant that 17 weeks they were showing reruns, and we watched them, and we liked it. But nowadays, if we get into any show that we've already seen, unless it's an absolute favorite of ours, we switch away. So I would say that the answer to that is that ABC would rather not, quote unquote, damage a show like Pushing Daisies or Life, which is an NBC show, by airing it during the summer when the audience might be low. They would rather pour money into relaunching it in the fall with a big old hyper promotion. They'd rather treat it like a new show than a returning show because they figure they'll get a better return on their promotion investment that way.
Eric,
now, what I would say is, and again, I'm going to bless this concept that he and I are twins, because normally we agree about everything, but I'm going to disagree a little bit with you on this. I do think that they're not rerunning those shows during the summer because they don't want to build bad buzz. They don't want to have Pushing Daisies come out and get a low rating because people aren't really paying attention during the summer, and then have us in the press write about how, well, Pushing Daisies seemed like such a great show, but nobody's watching it. And then the next thing you know, it gets this reputation for being less successful than it could be. So I think that's why they're not running the stuff.
Well, okay, I'll concede that point, but I'll say that that's a result again of greater attention being devoted to the summer, where we can get on where I get an email every day, even in the dog days of August, telling me what the top-rated shows in television were, and everybody in the industry is watching ratings at a time when they should be off on the beach. In fact, what they're probably doing is sitting out on the beach with their BlackBerries, reading the overnight ratings from the night before at a time of the year when that never mattered in the past.
But I was going to go on and say I understand what you're saying about reruns, but I think cable also proves that certain shows rerun very well. The reason why ER does not rerun well is because the stories are so interlocking and they're so sequential that if you see an ER from the second season and then you see an ER from the fifth season, you don't know where the storylines are. And so it's hard to watch those reruns out of sequence, and it's hard to miss a couple and not know what's going on. But Law and Order has been rerunning on TNT and USA and A&E for a decade now, and it's been very healthy. And what I noticed with shows like Burn Notice and The Closer and some other Mad Men, I think, also does this, they show those shows multiple times in a week. Mm-hmm. So people have a chance to catch the show if they can't see it when it originally airs.
Well, and that also aids its Nielsen rating known as a cum, where if you as much audience as you can accumulate in 7 days, you can on a certain metric of their
and what people will tell you from the cable channels is that it actually builds audience. It actually does help to give people multiple chances to catch that
and even
that episode.
Networks are doing that now too.
Yeah. So I think really the main reason why you're not seeing reruns of Pushing Daisies and shows like that is that the networks don't want the show to look unhip, and they figure if you're enough of a fan that you really want to catch up on the show, you will watch them online. They're available online, or you'll go rent the DVDs from Blockbuster, or you'll go to Hulu and you'll see it there. There are usually multiple places where you can catch up on these shows without actually having to see them on television.
Yeah, we really haven't even gotten into that part. We're almost done here, but the role of flash video in making it possible for all these websites to stream full episodes of TV shows in addition to all the webisodes and little things that people pass around amongst each other is easily the single most important trend going forward in television, because it will allow shows to develop buzz without the traditional approaches that networks have taken. It will allow shows to migrate from someone's basement to cable to potentially someday network television, hopefully with larger production budgets as they go along. But it will allow for but we've seen it actually with the guys who write for SNL. Andy Samberg and his partner started out just doing pirate videos, and this is the kind of thing that is really exciting, because it means that a concept we were probably talking about 10 years ago. Anybody with an idea can 20 years ago, anybody with an idea could publish a newsletter or a magazine or a book, and now we're to the point where anybody with an idea can not only produce a compelling 5 to 7 minute video, they can distribute it in a smart, effective manner that will allow people literally to take it with them, embed them on their blogs, get other people interested in it, and so on and so on.
Well, guys, I want to tell people how they can check out your work. You can read Aaron Barnhart's blog, TV Barn, at www.tvbarn.com. And you can check out Eric Deggans' blog, The Feed, now check this out. There's no www here. It's just blogs, blogs, tampabay.com/media, media. Eric, we got to work on that.
Believe me, if it was in my control. Actually, what you can also do is just go to ericdeggans.com, and there's a link that'll take you to the feed.
Oh, I didn't know that. Good for you. All right, Eric, go to ericdeggans.com. Give him the count on its counter. Aaron, as I suspected, it was very easy work for me tonight. You guys did all the work. I did all the heavy lifting. You're good guests. You're good friends, and it was great to have you on here together. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, Bob. Thanks a lot.
Definitely. We're going to have to figure out some way to actually do this in person now.
That would involve me and a plane ticket to Florida. So
there you go.
we'll have to work on that. You'll have to strong arm your sponsors into that, Bob.
Yeah, we'll figure something out, I'm sure. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the season.
Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye, guys. So for dozens more celebrity and media newsmaker interviews, you can surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with the stars, writers, and producers of The Cleaner, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, SpongeBob SquarePants, Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Heroes, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Army Wives, 24, The Big Bang Theory, Bad Santa, Tell Me You Love Me, The Dark Knight, and many others. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, Digital Journal, Blueberry, Zencast, Odeo, Kindle, or iTunes. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. I appreciate it so much when you take a little bit of time out of your day to spend it with us. Hope you'll be back and join us real soon, and tell some friends.